stamping and crafting friends. Welcome to Melissa's Crafting Treehouse. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make a simple watercolor background on the Linen Specialty Paper. We'll be using the Eden's Garden stamp set for this Stamp Club project. The Eden's Garden stamp set can also be purchased as a bundle with the Eden dies, and you'll save 10%. We won't be using the Eden dies today. We'll just be using some of the smaller images in the Eden's Garden set. I'll also be using the Quiet Meadow stamp set for this small little love image that's heat embossed in gold. You can also find other little images like this hello in the Blossoms and Blooms set that'll fit nicely on that tiny little piece of black cardstock. Now I'm going to be using 4 ink pads to create this card, the jet black StazOn for the stamping, and the 3 colors shown here for my watercolor background. I'm using Cajun Craze, Bumblebee, and Misty Moonlight. Now I'm going to begin by stamping my images with my jet black StazOn, but before I begin, let me give you a quick tip. It is especially important that your StazOn ink pad is well inked, because this is linen paper. It's essentially like a fabric, so there needs to be a little bit more ink on your stamp than maybe usual so that it really shows up on the texture of this paper. So I'm going to start by stamping one image in 3 select spots. These images will essentially serve as the anchor for the placement of my other images. One at a time, I'm going to bring in the different images that I want to work with and place them carefully to kind of fill in the whole background. And I am going back and forth from one image to the next as any particular image kind of fits the space that's available. Now each image will take the ink just a little bit differently depending on how much detail is in the given image, but what you'll want to do with every single image is make sure it's inked up really well and that you press firmly onto the linen paper so that the ink really absorbs into this very textured paper that's really kind of like fabric. Now I'm going to set aside my focal piece for just a moment while I get set up to do my watercolor background, and I'm pulling in my F-size acrylic block. It's a large block that actually would fit over a whole card. And I'm going to begin adding some ink to the acrylic block, starting with my Bumblebee ink in the center. You always want to start with your lightest ink to minimize the possibility that you'll contaminate the lighter colors with the darker colors. So now I've got my Cajun Craze ink along the edge. If it overlaps the yellow, I'm not too worried about it since the Cajun Craze is such a dark color. And then on the other end, I'm going to grab my Misty Moonlight ink and ink it up on the other end of the acrylic block. Next, I'm going to be working with water, so I'm going to just put my acrylic block onto a plastic surface with a paper towel on it, just to protect my work surface, and I'm going to liberally spray over the acrylic block with the ink with my spray bottle. Now, the more water you add, the more blended the ink colors will be, and I've chosen colors such that when they mix, I might get some oranges and greens in there as well, where the different colors meet. Keep in mind the color mixing happens on the acrylic block, not on the linen paper. Once it's stamped on the linen paper, it absorbs into the paper and is pretty much fixed. So now I am spraying my block again to activate some of the residual ink that's still on there and restamping it on my linen paper to fill in any gaps that may look white still. And I even just sprayed the linen paper directly to help the inks move around on that surface. As you can see, the paper curls up. It will flatten once the piece dries out. Now I've used this super simple method for creating my watercolor background on my linen paper, but you can also use something like a water painter that I'm showing here to essentially color directly onto your canvas if you like, or to do more color blending if you don't like exactly how it turned out with the acrylic block. on the piece you see here, I added color directly to my canvas using a water painter. The color scheme on this piece is Cajun Craze, Pool Party, and Mint Macaron. Now, while my focal piece dries, I'm going to get started with assembling my card. Now, this is a single card kit. If you're a club member, you would have received 2 of each of the items you see here. So I'm going to just start by folding my card body in half and burnishing on the fold. And I'm going to take the piece that will be the backing of my focal piece, and I'm going to attach it with a tiny little bit of adhesive onto my dry embossed piece of Bumblebee cardstock. Now I've dry embossed this piece using the time-worn type embossing folder, and that embossing has been done for those people who are receiving kits. By placing this black cardstock onto the dry embossed piece, it will serve as a guide, so I'll know how much of the Bumblebee cardstock I can tear off. So I'm using the tips of my fingers and my fingernails to guide how I'm ripping this cardstock. You want it sort of regularly irregular, if you will, and I'm tearing the piece in my left hand away from me. That leaves the cardstock on the right, what I'll be using for the card, of course, with the internal fibers of the cardstock showing. Now I'm adjusting the positioning of my black cardstock to make the edge on the top and the side even. And now I'm just going to go ahead and tear the left side of my dry embossed piece. And now I just need to tear the last side. Now after I finished tearing my fourth side and I looked at it, I realized I had more space on the top and bottom than I did on the left and right. So I went back and kind of adjusted it a little bit, tearing a little bit more off one of the ends. It's definitely harder to tear at this stage. So if you can get it right the first time with your tearing, that's ideal. Now I'm ready to do some quick assembly of my card. I've got a white piece for the inside, and I'm just going to lay my So Saffron piece on the card front. And I've got my dry embossed piece already torn, ready to go. And I've got dimensionals on the back side already. Now I'm ready to start assembling my focal piece. And this piece was set aside. I allowed it to dry overnight, but you can also go over it on the low setting with a heat tool to dry it. And as you can see here, the linen paper has a backing on it and it's got adhesive on the back side. I like to attach mine a little bit at a time, exposing just a little bit of the adhesive at the top, positioning it to get it in just the right spot, and then slowly pulling away the backing to guide it to make sure it gets in the center of my black cardstock. Since this paper is essentially fabric with adhesive on the back side, it's very pliable and movable, and so doing it a little bit at a time like this just helps to ensure that you're going to get the placement where you want it to be. Now after you've attached your linen paper to your cardstock, you may notice that the edges are a little bit different. This linen paper is essentially stretchable, so I have a little extra room down here on the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and trim off a little bit off that bottom off camera to even it up a bit. And that's a little bit more consistent from top to bottom. Now I'm going to add some color to my ribbon. This ribbon has little silver specks on it, and my color scheme is not really very silvery, so on this card here I added some yellow to the glitter, and I added that yellow using my Daffodil Delight Blends alcohol marker. For this one I'm going to use my bronze Blends alcohol marker for a little softer look.
And to do that, I'm just going to use the edge of my brush and color over the glitter specks. Now I don't really need to do in the middle because this middle section is going to be in behind. So I'm focusing on the ends. And there you can see the ones that are colored, and then in the center the ones that are not. And next I'm going to go ahead and tie my ribbon around the bottom. And then I'm just bowing my cardstock to move the ribbon to the spot that I want it to be on the left-hand side. And then I'm just going to trim off the ends. And now I'm ready to go ahead and attach my focal piece to my card. Now I've created a sentiment off camera by heat embossing in gold with that little love image. And I'm going to attach it with glue dots. And this piece is going to straddle the ribbon, so the top portion will be off the ribbon. So that's where I'm going to put my glue dots, because I think it'll stick a little bit better to the linen paper than to the ribbon. And there's my finished card. Just to compare the two, one thing I'd like to point out is that this is the one that I attached the linen paper to a piece of white cardstock and then trimmed it off. And this one I attached directly to its black backing. You can see that this one is a little bit darker because some of that black is showing through the weave of the fabric, whereas here we're seeing the white through the weave of the fabric. Not a big difference, but just something to be aware of depending on what you like better.
If you enjoyed this project and want to see more, make sure to check out my Club Projects playlist, linked at the end of this video. As a reminder, this is one of 3 of the current Stampers Club projects. If you'd like to receive free classes to go in the mail, plus free Stampin' Up! Products, you may want to join my online Stampers Club. To learn more, click on the little I in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, or click on the link in the video description below. I hope you enjoyed my project today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and happy crafting!